Good evening and welcome to the Marcellus Central School District Board of Education meeting for this evening, Monday, August 2nd, 2021. At this time, I would ask to please stand and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. First item on tonight's agenda, recognition, Green Gateway update.
So we have a couple of folks here tonight that are going to give us an update on the Green Gateway project. You probably are all aware it's difficult to pass by the road that runs the back way to Camillus without seeing the large signs that were placed there. So I'm going to introduce one of our teachers, Tyler Cooper, who's going to introduce the fine student, Liam, who is sitting next to him. And I will turn the program over to both of you for this update.
Would you like us to come up there?
Wherever you're comfortable.
Perfect. Let's see. So we just wanted to come and give an update for some of the things going on with the Green Gateway. We had made some significant progress after what seems to be a long dry spell with COVID kind of shutting everything down over the last year and a half. Liam Hawes is actually an alumni now. He's actually come back to kind of help full circle complete one of the projects that he started. So we started the presentation just by what you would see as you're driving along North Street, the back way to Camillus. Student-made signs, which will one day be updated to more permanent fixtures. But we wanted to give a couple of the updates, most recent, related to the project itself. So I'll introduce and then turn it over to Liam. One of the big projects that's going to be upcoming in August, actually, is what's called a creek vein. And so Liam will talk about some of the ones that have seen at Marcellus Park. But some of the big important key points to this, before I turn it over, is we had a significant donation from Hanson Aggregates, who donated 35 tons of boulders for the outdoor classroom and also the creek veins. You'll see some pictures of ways in which those boulders were utilized, and it was estimated to be around a $2,500 value. The Marcellus Central Schools, with the help of Mr. Riffle, also allocated some of the boulders that had been pushed off the upper baseball, softball fields that were kind of just like a little cliff right behind the high school. And we went through and we marked some of those that would be able to be suitable to be used for that project as well. And the creek veins are to be completed. You should see some progress being made actually this month down at the site. They're going to be bringing down some heavy equipment, and we're going to be getting some more boulders with the help of the town and the village and helping with some of that creek stabilization. Part of that was with Liam starting this 2 years ago now, was a permit application and then approval granted this summer by the DEC. Some of it's a little bit of a time game just in getting things through, which I'm sure you are aware of. And then the supervision of the installation is going to be by the National Fish and Wildlife Association with the help of Carl Schwartz. So he's going to pretty much come and point where he wants the rocks to go, and we're going to do what he says. He's going to be the boss. After this, to reduce some of the disturbance, because we are going to be bringing heavy equipment down into 9 Mile Creek with the oversight of the DEC and Fish and Wildlife, we're going to actually take that same entry point and use it as an ADA accessible public fishing access point. So at this point, I'm going to turn over some of the specifics of the creek veins, since that's what Hanson and the district has been most directly involved with, over to the expert.
Sure. All right, so cross veins, just a general idea. I'm not sure if you all know exactly what they are. Creek veins, it's the same terminology, but we've all been to Marcellus Park, and as part of a project down there, they have multiple creek veins that actually run through the park, and which makes sure that the river does not get any larger or erode any more of the bank, especially because a lot of the area is really low and flat to the ground there. So the general idea of how a creek vein helps and benefits and reduces the erosion is going to be through something called a pool riffle system. So at the beginning here, we will have our creek vein, which is going to create this pool, which is a nice deep area of water that a lot of fishes like to hang out with. It also oxygenates that water, which helps other inhabitants of the water. And then a riffle after it, which is kind of your typical whitewater rafty kind of looking stuff there. And then it continues this pattern, which absorbs a lot of the energy of the water, and it pushes the water out wider in the creek, which helps mitigate the erosion and gives a lot more space for wildlife to take hold and fishing to occur. So, oh, you can see that.
Okay.
So what we did, we have a creek veins that we're planning on putting right down here is the number 2 one. And that's going to be the general location. And then further up, there was originally a bridge and a raceway track across the other side of the project. And because of the mill location, there is remnants of where the water wheel part was. So there's already kind of a creek vein naturally in higher where the creek vein 1 location is. But right now we're working on the creek vein 2 location. So, yeah.
So Liam, just to kind of give an overview, went through, surveyed. Part of it was working with the DEC Fish and Wildlife 2 years ago to talk about what should be done in order to prevent the bank from continuing to erode. If you've been down recently, you'll see some significant damage because of the erosion taking place, which again, as we're thinking about putting a footpath and things to make it a more accessible park, would put those potentially at risk over time. And so that's one of the things that we had to do most immediately to be able to make sure that any of the subsequent projects could be completed without fear of them being disrupted in the future. One of the, as we continue on some of the updates, one of our crown jewels at the moment is that outdoor classroom space. If you haven't been down there, the town and the village have done a fantastic job. This is actually one of the design plans brought to life. Bronte Saul, who just recently graduated, and Corinne Bandera, who came up with the design plans for this to try and make it as natural as possible. With highlighting the acoustics, you'll see that there's a berm in the back, which is actually going to be higher on completion. So that way you're blocking out some of the sounds and the road noise coming from behind on North Street and magnifying the acoustics coming from the creek, which this outdoor classroom is facing. Some of the highlights, this is where some of the stone was used from Hanson and also from the school district. And as you look at the base, they did do some drainage tile to make sure that that water didn't collect in an outdoor classroom, so that way it had adequate drainage. But the other feature that actually Don McLaughlin came up with was kind of a Loctite seal on the pebbles. So if you can imagine bringing a kindergarten class down to the outdoor classroom, we just had gravel sitting around those big boulders. Now imagine trying to keep their attention for like 30, 40 minutes in an outdoor space with a bunch of projectiles sitting right around. So what the suggestion was is to lock that in. It still allows the surface to be permeable without having the temptation for projectiles while you're trying to deliver a lesson where you're trying to have kids learn in that outdoor space. The next one, we have some students. All of these projects, just to highlight, are student ideas, student design plans, and it's really because of the support of the district, the village, and the town that they come to life. So the students' ideas are the ones that are out behind this. They work with local professionals, and this footpath is another example, which we would like to be an extension of the current creek walk coming from Marcellus Park. The students had to come up with how much millings, how much stone dust was needed in terms of volume and quantities. So going through surveying the site, mapping it all out, and then working with the town and village to be able to make sure that all those materials were placed in an adequate fashion. The parking lot turnaround is much better than it was, but still not complete yet. We're going to be taking some of the millings from the town to be able to help level this. One of the big concerns when we did a survey of the site, again, students that have since graduated did a site survey with Joe Duran and TDK. And one of the things that they found was the dangerous exit entry path as you're coming down. So if you've ever been over to the site, you'll notice the steep incline coming down into the site. And then as you're trying to exit with like kind of almost a blind turn with all of that brush along North Street that's grown up. And so one of the things the students worked on was talking about elevations that kind of like an entrance exit platform would need to be, so that way that wasn't a safety risk. So the initial survey and site prep was done. Now we're looking at the final surface once we get some of the equipment in and out, so that way it doesn't disrupt that final parking lot turnaround. And then one of the more recent projects completed this year was historical plaques. So one of the things, as the students were working with the mayor, that he was very adamant about was honoring the past as we look to improve the site. Because of the significance of the mills for the Marcellus community in terms of the economy, he didn't want to lose sight of that, even though there are no longer any remnants of the building other than retaining wall along North Street and some of the features that Liam was talking about down at the creek itself. That was a massive, massive building, and there's really very little left of it. And so one of the things that he worked with one of the students this year, Jaden Kaposi, was, can we dig up the history, with the mayor being a history buff himself, written 2 books about Marcellus. He was a great resource for Jaden to be able to go through and kind of make a timeline or a map of what was happening at the site. And then also related features that are going to be separate plaques that are going to be placed around that footpath upon completion. So another one of the updates that we worked on and completed within the last year. And then upcoming. So we have some updates and completions. We still have much that's coming. One of them being the construction of a lookout platform. We already have the design plans, again, done by students Dakota Baker and Noah Beeler. So this is going to be at the southern point looking under North Street Bridge. Also completing the ADA accessible public fishing access. We're going to get Joe Killing involved with his ag classes and doing some soil sampling. Initially, when we did the site proposal plan, when the village was looking to acquire the property from the county, we were looking at doing a solar farm. But with the already reduced amount of discount that they get for municipalities, we're looking at reutilizing that space rather than having a solar farm. Looking to have a community orchard that the students can be involved with in terms of preparation and then maintenance. And so we're looking at getting that underway as well. Restoration of retaining the wall that's along North Street, with it being one of the last remnants of that site, and it being quite aesthetic. We want to make sure that we try and preserve some of that history as much as we can. And then updating the Arboretum. You notice we've cleared out a lot. We've already got a willow program that we've established connections with at ESF to help make sure that we don't have soil runoff or whatnot with the site. And then the big one, we just recently had Senator John Mannion down because the students completed what's known as a SAM grant. So it's a state municipal grant. And they were asking for $180,000 for a footbridge that connects the site to school district property. So that way students coming down can easily get access rather than having to go all the way down to North Street. And he granted it, and kind of in a show of like being excited about the project, he came down and got a tour of the site. And so that's one of the upcoming projects that students are going to have another opportunity to be able to be involved with for that project. And then lastly, just because we don't have it listed yet doesn't mean it's not necessarily going to happen. The idea with this is it's going to be a longstanding relationship and connection between the school district and the community. And this is an easy way that the students can kind of get some practical application of things that they're learning in the classroom and apply it to the real world. So we're looking at it for the long haul and continuing to build on these projects. So if you know any students upcoming that are excited about projects and ways to give back to the community, this is one of those opportunities where we have the unique situation in Marcellus with all these different people interacting in a very positive way. The district, the town, the village, the state, the county now, and it doesn't happen normally. And so we're seeing kind of the magic of what happens when you get all of these people and these resources together in a positive manner. Questions?
So the creek veins aren't there. You're going to be creating them?
Yeah.
So there'll be man-made creek veins, or maybe creek veins are man-made, I don't know.
So if you ever go across a creek, you might see a tree that's fallen in it. And that's a type of creek vein. That's a naturally occurring creek vein. However, these creek veins are going to be man-made as the stones are going to be put in to increase the longevity of the river in its current shape with decreasing the erosion. Erosion is a natural process, but when we build things around it, we kind of want to prevent too much of it from occurring from heavy storms.
Yeah, so they're gonna be bringing in, I think the approximate diameter of the boulders they're gonna be using are 2 by 2 by 2. And so, the town's gonna be bringing them down. We've got a number of them that we're gonna be taking from right up from behind the high school that we can use without having additional costs because they're just sitting there. And then we're gonna be getting some additional ones from the town and then also some of the ones that Hanson's already brought down, but they're gonna put it in a particular pattern.
And the DEC determines the placement of those
Yes,
in the creek.
DEC and Fish and Wildlife, so they're literally gonna be coming down. It's gonna be the village and any other hired contractors that are gonna be working on the project with machinery down in 9 Mile Creek, and the DEC is gonna be sitting there. They're gonna be looking to minimize any disruptions to the creek because it is a protected body of water. And then the Fish and Wildlife is gonna be looking at the placement of those veins, so that way you get that adequate riffle pool system. And then one of the things we talk about is the reason we're looking to put the public fishing access right at that access or entry point is because that'll actually create a nice little fishing pool. So that way you, instead of having like a fishing access point with like a barren part of the creek, there'll be some prime fishing.
So
right there.
the fishing access point will be at one of those pools.
Yes,
Correct me if I'm wrong, I remember one of our trips down there, the gentleman that was the expert in this area was talking about, they were using Marcellus Park as an example. So
yes.
most of us have been there. You can see there's man-made creek veins there as well.
So in Marcellus Park where it looks like
Those
rocks
are-
have
yeah,
been
those
placed.
beach-
You know where
those
the
beach
ducks
patterns-
Yeah,
go right
so that's,
into
that was purposeful.
Yes,
Yeah, right
The
at the end of the docks
Yeah.
during the old home days.
Yeah.
That's a prime example. right
That's a
there.
good mile marker. Liam.
yeah, so it's gonna look very similar.
Okay.
There's different patterns that they can use, and that's gonna be what determine, the students have, Liam and Jonah did some work on in terms of placement and design. And then it'll really be, once we get down there and once we've seen 2 years of changes on the creek, they'll determine whether or not that's still gonna be viable, if they have to make some modifications.
So a vein will increase the depth of the water without actually lowering the bed of the creek.
Right,
Yeah, it increases it right in front of the vein. But overall, it kind of like you're turning the water, you're making turbulence in that area, which just eats up some of the energy of the water that it has. Like if you ever see a falls, that's eating a lot of energy. It's kind of a mini version of that. And it also kind of forces the water to be wider. So the issue is if you ever take a narrow channel like this, the water, if you're flowing water and it goes really fast. But if you open it up and give it more surface area, for the same volume of water, it can move a lot slower. And the goal is to make the water move slower. The faster it goes, the more pebbles, the more boulders, the more rocks it can pick up. And we're really trying to prevent that.
any other questions?
So we placed this during recognition because, you know, some of the things that Tyler has been working on with the students over the last few years really ties into, we go way back in time, pre-COVID, when we started doing our mission and commitment work, which we'll be excited to pick up again, hopefully this year. One of the commitments made by that mission and vision task force was really to engage kids in learning by doing and making sure that we're providing opportunities for students to do real things. And you've seen some great examples in this project, and Tyler's one of those teachers that, you know, he's sort of willing to go along on all of our crazy ideas, and he actually makes them better because he brings them to life. So we certainly value Tyler's ability to envision and implement. Definitely the kids, the students, the adults that are making a major impact in this community, for all of us that live here and enjoy it. And the partnerships, you know, of our community entities. Well, as Tyler said, you just don't see this everywhere. So it's wonderful to see that we're all working together on something that's, I mean, I don't know that Liam will ever forget this. And there will be, you know, when he's competing with other students that haven't had experiences like this, you know, that gives him an edge as well. So just, I think they certainly deserve our recognition, and Ryan for helping in all the ways he has in helping to secure that donation for Hanson. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
I would just like to say thank you, Leanne, for continuing your work on this. You graduated, you could simply walk away, and you haven't, so kudos to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Item number 4, presentations, COVID-19's impact on our school updates.
On a lighter note, before I start with that, just one quick other recognition. Hopefully you caught this either on Syracuse.com or on one of our many platforms. But we were honored as a school of distinction by the New York State Public High School Athletic Association because 100% of our Marcellus varsity teams receives Scholar Team Athlete Awards. This is a major accomplishment. We usually do pretty well, but to have 100% is amazing. So, and during a pandemic, maybe gives it like a triple amazing status. So congratulations to all of our student athletes for sticking with it, even during some really hard times. So that was my other recognition tonight. And then now on to COVID. Here's my sentence. I think I've had this up here every single PowerPoint. So here's the lay of the land right now. I've set a schedule for communications over the summertime, and those of you that have kids in school, you've already been receiving them. I've been trying to do a letter about every 2 weeks and follow it or preview it with an email update to staff. I keep saying there's really not a lot of guidance, but the latest is I think our governor has essentially determined that he will not be the one making decisions about how things will look at local school districts. The track record of our governor is that sometimes that sticks and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm not going to say that's a hard and fast statement, but it could be. It does appear, at least at this point, that we'll be engaging more at the county level. Here's how things have been working. The New York State Department of Health generally will issue some guidance. The New York State Education Department and the county generally will follow that guidance. So I think to some degree, there may be some waiting for the DOH. I don't know that the governor has told the DOH not to give guidance. I haven't heard that. So I know that we do have an upcoming meeting very soon with county officials, and likely we'll be talking about return to school. My position at this point is we should be having school for all kids that will be coming here. Nothing at this point should preclude us from doing that. I think the big question remains about masking. Today, I don't know if you caught either the county executive's brief talk or any stories that ensued after, but he did announce he'd be issuing an executive order that masks will be required at all senior living facilities, which is obviously maybe the first sign of a ramp up there. And also made the statement that those who are immunocompromised should consider masking as well, even if vaccinated. I track the numbers in the county every few days. Certainly cases are trending up. I don't have a sense that the quantity of serious cases are trending up. I think that sort of remains the big money question. Those of us in schools saw kids, for example, getting COVID with a headache and a sniffle looking more like a cold. Not that I want to downplay, but simply that's a fact, that a lot of cases aren't severe. So I don't have a real sense of that other than hospitalizations aren't skyrocketing at this point. So I just a little data point from July 19th to yesterday, there were 371 new cases in the county. And the governor announced today that they're seeing about 33% from household transmission, meaning once it gets into your house, it's going to spread through everybody there. So you are going to see more rapid spread. Maybe that was a play on revisit ways to keep people from catching it in your own household. What we saw in the over the last year is that there's no rhyme or reason to spread in households. We would see families where it went through the whole family. We saw families where one person had it, no one else got it. We saw families where everyone got it except for one person. So if I could figure out how this was actually working, I'd probably be a millionaire. But those were just some of the things talked about today, and also from the data that I collected. There seems to be, there's a couple pushes happening. One is that the county is looking for school districts that want to do vaccination sites before school starts. We've done 2 clinics here. I think it's a great thing that we can offer a convenience to our community. We're more than willing to do another one. Not sure what the interest is. And interest largely would trend with who doesn't already have it, that's willing to get it. But we may be dipping our toe back in that pool. If you've tried to get a COVID test lately, you would notice that all the resources that once were put to testing have been taken away and were put towards vaccines. So it was a little bit more challenging to get a COVID test and likely have to pay for it where you didn't have to before. It looks like we're going to be going back to having testing sites. I think there'll be information probably coming out at a press conference soon. And they're definitely, as I told you before, interested in partnering with schools to do testing of some sort. They've mentioned pool testing. It may just be testing in general. My take when I talked to Dr. Gupta was that our community didn't seem to be a community that wanted testing based on the fact that we canceled at least 2, if not 3, testing clinics last year. So certainly we'd be willing to host a testing point for our community, but I think it would be unlikely a lot of people would take advantage unless it was tied to something. So something like if you test, you aren't required to wear your mask, or you aren't required to quarantine, or you can test out of quarantine. I tried to give her some ideas just based on what my experience was during my other professional job as a contact tracer. So there's definitely talk, obviously, about the masking, and I envision, if I had a crystal ball, that there will be some masking next year. We certainly have a subset of our population that are not allowed yet to get a vaccine. I think there's talk about older kids who have a choice to get a vaccine, having some family choice around masking, but I really don't know how it'll shake out. I've told parents in my update letters, and I send them to you all too, that I will keep them posted as soon as I know something. If they're not hearing anything from me, it's because I haven't heard anything new. But every 2 weeks I tell them that. I don't know anything new, but here I am telling you that again. So I will keep you posted. That's what we have right now. I don't know if there's any other questions. Hello.
Hello. First, I want to commend all of you for the past year and what you've all done for our students. 2 grandchildren in the school system, and again, you must have had been pulled from side to side and among yourselves and with others. So I first want to start to commend all of you for that. I do have a question. I understand that there is a lot of questions still remaining as far as what can be done. But what I would like to know is, what exactly do you know in this regard? Do you know how many of your staff, including the teachers, are fully vaccinated? And if so, can you share that information with us, especially with the students that we have that are younger than 12 that cannot be vaccinated? So I want to know for myself and for my grandchildren how safe they are in returning to the school. How many of your staff will be fully vaccinated when the school season begins?
So here's what I can tell you. We initially were directed to collect that information. Then we were told we were not allowed to collect that information. And so we did not collect that information because that's, it's a violation of some of the healthcare rights of individuals. That being said, we have asked staff to voluntarily share with us copies of their vaccination, record card that you get, or you can download the Excelsior Pass, that a screenshot of that works as well. And that information, I just keep in a folder. I don't have like an aggregate, because my use for that is for the contact tracing process. I'm not really in a position to share that data, but I can tell you, we have a high rate of vaccination here. It's not 100%. I don't think anybody will have 100% vaccination, but we do have a pretty high rate of vaccination.
What does a pretty high rate mean?
I don't have a number, but I know it's a high number. So I can't tell you an exact number.
I'm not living, can you give us an approximation?
I would say at least 80%, if not more. So that being said, when we talk about safety of school, I want to go all the way back to when this started and numbers were much higher than certainly they are now. We had a really consistent phenomenon happen here. COVID entered our school. COVID went nowhere when it got here. And that's at a time where people weren't vaccinated. And like I said, numbers were much higher. And that consistently held. We had 2 cases of transmission. One was on a sports team with 2 people that worked very closely together. And one was in an adult situation, 2 adults eating together. Those are the only 2 cases of transmission we had all of last year. Jean, my partner in crime, and I did all the contact tracing. So we knew every single case, every single person. We talked to every single family with some help from some of the principals when we needed it. And so I can tell you that with 100% certainty, it came in and it didn't go anywhere. So what that tells me is that the mitigation efforts that we use at school kept kids safe. I feel a high level of security being here. I've been here every day since it shut down, a year and a half ago. And, I think I fit at the time into 4 categories of risk, probably 3 now. And, I have felt very safe and secure here myself as someone who has some reason to have, some concern of being exposed to COVID. Everybody will have to ultimately make decisions. I think the state of New York feels fairly confident with what schools accomplished because the commissioner declared, not that she can't go back on it, but she's declared that school districts are not required to offer a virtual option. So what that tells me is she feels very comfortable with students returning to school. So that's what I can tell you.
Are you going to also monitor the students who are coming back as far as vaccinations?
If we're able to do so, we will collect their cards so that we know who does and who doesn't, but it will largely be for contact tracing unless they tell us legally we're required to. Right now the vaccination is not required, and therefore we really don't have a legal stance to collect that information. I'm collecting it on a voluntary basis because most people are content to give it if in fact they know I'm using it so that they didn't have to quarantine, because that's what it was coming down to in the spring. If I know that you're vaccinated, the quarantine rules are different.
Looking at the crystal ball, and I understand.
It broke. I don't have it.
But if the staff is not vaccinated, will there at least be some consideration for that member of the staff who is not vaccinated to be masked?
Right now, that's the rule. So, rules change, but I don't see that. I don't really see that changing right now myself. In my crystal ball, that's what's happening right now. If you aren't vaccinated, I have some folks that their doctors have told them not to be vaccinated, and they mask. So that's the rule now.
But is it voluntary on their part or is? the
I
school-
sent an email and told them, if you aren't vaccinated, put your mask on.
It's on the honor system.
It's on the honor system?
Yes, it has to be because we can't ask them if they are.
Luckily, I have
No, I
very
understand
honorable
that.
people, yeah.
But if they will give you the information, will there at least be a requirement that they be masked? I'm talking in particular with those members of staff who come in contact with students.
I don't anticipate that rule changing, and it is the rule now. Sure, for now.
Next item, building project update.
So we have had maybe the perfect weather for a turf replacement. How's that? I hate to even say that out loud. I better knock on some wood here. Our turf replacement is complete. There are a couple touch-ups that need to be done, but the punch list items more than anything. It looks fantastic. And just, these are some, we have our professional photographer, Tony Sinaccio, on the job, taking some shots for us, and you can just see some of the images. I will tell you, they don't do it justice. It's quite extraordinary. What happens next? We are now at the stage of the process where track resurfacing is very close to beginning. The company has been on site cleaning and prepping the surface. We're expecting to see the full resurfacing crew on site by Monday, the 9th. And they're also working on some of the remaining sidewalk work, some of the connections and widening that were part of the project, connecting where we put the choral room, the new choral room in the high school project, and also the instrumental room to that concession sidewalk, so that we're not walking through areas that are muddy and wet to get from here to there. We are looking very good for our fall season. As you know, we had planned to probably not be on the turf until midway through the season. I hate to say that we might not need to be off it at all, but hey, we might not need to be off it at all. We may actually be able to start practices there on the 23rd. So fingers crossed. We have been very lucky.
So this would be this would be getting access to it much sooner than we initially anticipated.
Oh, yes. We were hoping, if everything went pretty smoothly, the second week of September to maybe be on it, and it's looking like it's much sooner. We've had the right kind of storms, that have been fast and furious and over. And as you know, those humid times, it evaporated immediately and they were right, back to work, and it's just worked out well. So all is well on the building project.
Item number 5, resident comments. Public expression at Board of Education meetings is encouraged, and a specific portion of the agenda shall provide for this privilege. In most instances, the board shall reserve judgment regarding questions and concerns that are brought to the board's attention at board meetings, as it is typically not prudent for the board to make instantaneous determinations. In addition, many issues that are brought to the board's attention do not require a formal determination by the board, but rather are most appropriately addressed either by the superintendent or persons designated by the superintendent without further board action. This is in accordance with board policy 3220. At this time, are there any resident comments?
There
Mr.
are none,
Sinaccio, any virtually?
no resident comments.
Item 6, business. 6.1, amendment to Board of Education meeting schedule for the 2021-22 school year. Resolved that the Board of Education approves the following change to the 2020-2022 schedule of meetings for the Board of Education. March 14th, 2022 meeting moved to March 7th, 2022. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Mike, second.
Second.
Kelly? Questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Item 6.2, acceptance of gift donation. Resolved that the Board of Education approves the, excuse me, approves the gift donation of bench stones and veining stones for the Marcellus Outdoor Classroom by Hanson Aggregates. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Sean,
I'll second it.
Patty, second. Any questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Item 6.3, first reading of Board of Education policies. Resolved that the Board of Education approves the first reading of the following district policies. You can see them in front of you. I'm not going to read through each one. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Kelly?
I'll second.
Second, Mike. Questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Item 7, personnel. Resolved that the following personnel items be approved. Item 7.1. 7.7. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Sean? Second,
Second.
Patty. Comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Item A, consent agenda. Resolved that the consent agenda consisting of the following items be approved. 8.1 through 8.4. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Kelly. Second,
Second.
Patty. Comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Item 9, information items, board workshop updates.
Yeah, so quickly, as you know, we are scheduled to do the workshop on September 13th from 5 to 8. I think our best bet at this point is to enjoy this beautiful room. I could get the event catered by Panera. There's a variety of good options, I think, salads and soups and sandwiches. And we're just running up against most of the restaurants we would use to go and do an on-site are closed on Mondays, and Monday seems to be the best night for you all. So if everybody's good with that, I'm gonna proceed with that plan. Sounds good.
Everyone good with that?
Yep.
All right. Item 10, resident comments. Are there any other resident comments at this time? Item 11, 11.1, enter executive session. Resolved that the meeting in public be adjourned and an executive session be convened for the purpose of discussion of the superintendent's contract. May I have a motion?
Yes.
Patty,
Second.
Mike, second. Time is 7:43. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Carried.